Ryuto is one of the more mysterious characters in the Metal series. I mean, he got introduced very late into the last season of the show, and we know next to nothing about him except for the fact that he's a treasure hunter. Seriously, he just randomly appeared in an episode, and we got no backstory for his character. It's almost like as quickly as he was introduced, he left the story almost just as fast. We first saw him hunting for the Star Fragment, then he met and battled Jinga, they then joined forces and he helped them get to Dynamis. He battled Dynamis, and then after realizing he couldn't take the Star Fragment, he just left. And that's it. That's all Ryuto did. Well, we also saw him at the very end giving his power to Jinga, but so did everyone else. So basically, Ryuto got introduced in the Mist Mountain arc, and he left the story in that same arc, which mind you is only 5 episodes. Bro was barely in the show. But despite his serious lack of screen time, he's still somewhat a fan favorite character, and the subject to many interesting conversations. A big reason for this is probably due to his striking resemblance to Ryuga. I mean, seriously, why do they look the exact same? The Metal series has some of the most unique character designs I've ever seen, so Ryuto looking exactly like Ryuga has to mean something. Many think they're brothers or cousins, which is very possible, but the only thing we know for sure is that they're both from the Dragon Clan. We don't really know much about the Dragon Clan. It was only in the manga, and it wasn't really expanded upon, but it would explain why they look alike, being from the same clan. I won't dive into the Dragon Clan in this video, but let me know if you're interested in that. Maybe the Dragon Clan can get its own video one day, but back to Ryuga and Ryuto. The similarities don't stop at just their physical appearances. We also have their names, which are pretty similar. They both use dragon Beyblades, and Ryuto's special move looks very similar to Ryuga's dark move. They both summon spheres of energy and then send it to their Beyblades. So yeah, they're very similar, but that's not what this video is about. This video is setting out to answer a question I saw on Reddit, and that is, how did Ryuto know about the Star Fragment? On face value, it's a pretty simple question that doesn't sound like it'd warrant an entire video, but it's more complicated than it seems. When Jinga met Ryuto, he already knew about the Star Fragment, which was very unusual for a new character. Almost all of the new characters we meet in Metal Fury had no idea what the Star Fragment was, but Ryuto did. So I've come up with 2 possible ways in which Ryuto could have found out about the whole Star Fragment story. The first one we're going to talk about is going to be a bit more realistic, while the second one is more fun, but it's also still somewhat realistic. So let's just jump right in. The first way Ryuto could have learned about the Star Fragment is he just heard about it through a rumor. This kind of makes sense. It's a pretty easy explanation. I mean, why wouldn't the news about legendary bladers spread? And as a treasure hunter, he's probably more in the loop about this kind of thing. Like maybe one of his treasure hunting friends heard about it and then told him. And even if the rumor was seen as nothing more than a myth, a treasure hunter would still probably be interested, like Ryuto was. My only problem with this theory though, is that the whole legendary blader thing didn't seem like common knowledge. Literally every single legendary blader besides Yuki and Dynamis had no idea what the Star Fragment was. They only knew about it because they had a personal connection to it. But it seems like if you weren't personally connected to the Star Fragment in the story, you would have no way to know about it, and that was on purpose. The WBBA chose to leave it in the hands of Jinga and the gang because they didn't want any legendary bladers to fall into the hands of evil. I mean, if it was all common knowledge, it'd make things a whole lot easier for Team Nemesis. Now, I don't know if the WBBA outright stated that they were going to keep things private, but I feel like it can just be implied. I mean, if they didn't care about keeping things private, why didn't they just spread the news like wildfire? They could definitely do it. They have connections all over the globe now after the World Championships, and spreading the news across the world would have made finding the legendary bladers so much easier. Yet they didn't do it. Jinga did spread the news, but only to a select group of people who he knew he could completely trust. So we can pretty much assume that they wanted to keep this whole thing under wraps. This doesn't mean it was like a top secret operation or anything, but they also didn't just go around telling anyone. What this means is the odds that a rumor could have spread all the way to Ryuto is a little unlikely. I mean, if this was the case, then surely at least one more legendary blader would have heard about the Star Fragment before meeting Jinga, but none of them did. So that's our first option, Ryuto hearing about it from a rumor. It's the more realistic explanation, but it's still not perfect. So now we're going to move on to the second theory on how Ryuto could have learned about the Star Fragment, and that is from a legendary blader. This theory has Ryuto running into one of the 10 legendary bladers and learning the story from them. It's an interesting idea, but it can't just be any legendary blader. There is some criteria. First off, this little meetup would have to have taken place before the Mist Mountain arc, because by then he knew about the Star Fragment. So our time frame is going to be from the start of Metal Fury to the end end of the Destroyer Dome arc. And it may be even less than that because who knows how long Ryuto had been searching for the Star Fragment at this point. Our second condition is that the legendary blader Ryuto met would have to have known about the story as well. This is going to narrow it down a lot because, like we talked about earlier, hardly anyone knew the lore at this point. So now let's start narrowing it down and find out which legendary blader told Ryuto about the Star Fragment. First off, it's not Rago. He was hiding away in that waterfall. He'd have no reason to tell Ryuto about anything. We can also rule out Jinga, Yuki, Kyoya, Dynamis, and Aguma. That's already more than half. We ruled them out because all of them met Ryuto for the first time at Mist Mountain when he already knew the story, so it couldn't have been them. Then we can rule out Chris and Tithy because their arcs took place after Mist Mountain, and they didn't even know the story at first, so they couldn't have possibly told Ryuto. Then we have the legendary blader of Mars, King. Timeline-wise, it works, but it's pretty unlikely. King learned about the Star Fragment in the Destroyer Dome arc, which takes place right before Mist Mountain, so technically it could have happened, but it's a huge stretch. I mean, there's just not enough time between Destroyer Dome and Mist Mountain to where Ryuto and King could have met. And plus, King went back to New York with Masamune, and I doubt Ryuto has any business there. He hunts for ancient treasure, and New York City just doesn't have that. He's got no reason to go there. So that's why I think King doesn't work. And then that leaves us with the final legendary blader, Ryuga. Ryuga being the one to tell Ryuto about the Star Fragment actually makes a ton of sense. First of all, besides Dynamis, he was the first legendary blader to be found by Jinga in the group. This leaves a decent amount of time for a meetup with Ryuto to take place before Mist Mountain. Also, across the entire show, the two never met on screen. This is important because if they met in the show for the first time, it would cook this theory because they'd recognize each other. Also, after Ryuga learned about the story, he left on a journey to find the legendary bladers all over the world. We saw him visit some ancient civilizations, and I think the Tower of Babel. I mean, those locations seem right up Ryuto's alley. Just think about it. At the time, they were both traveling the world, and maybe they just ran into each other. Now, is it unlikely that they somehow stumbled upon each other at some random location in the world? Yes. But I'd argue it's also pretty unlikely that Jinga and his friends kept on finding legendary bladers no matter where they went. So sometime between Ryuga's arc on the island and Mist Mountain, the two somehow crossed paths on one of their journeys. But now we have to ask, even if they did run into each other, why would Ryuga tell Ryuto about anything? We know he's not one to waste time on things that don't matter to him, so why would he take the time to explain things to Ryuto? There's two possibilities. If you believe that they're related, then that's reason enough. They'd recognize each other, maybe catch up, they'd definitely have a battle, and then Ryuga would probably tell him. After getting crushed, Ryuto would ask how Ryuga got so much stronger, and he could give his whole piece about being the Dragon Emperor, but at the end, he could also add that he was chosen by a star. I don't think Ryuga would tell him everything, but just enough to get Ryuto intrigued and set him on the path of Mist Mountain. Now, even if you don't want to say that they're related, I still think Ryuga would give him the time of day. Depending on how much the Dragon Clan plays a role in this, he would probably know that Ryuto is from his clan, but even if the Dragon Clan had nothing to do with any of this, at the very least, he'd be a little bit curious as to why this guy looks just like him. I think they'd battle, Ryuto would get crushed, and then he would ask how Ryuga is so strong. We're from the same clan, yet you're levels ahead of me. And Ryuga would say the same thing. He's the Dragon Emperor, and he was chosen by a star. This little meeting would set Ryuto on the path to finding the Star Fragment, and that's when we would meet him at Mist Mountain. And again, this would have to take place sometime after Ryuga's arc and before Mist Mountain, so there's a decent amount of time to work with there. You could even say Ryuto was trying to make his way to this tournament, the one with Ryuga, Tsubasa, and Kenta, but maybe he was late, and by the time he got there, it was already over, and then on his way back, he ran into Kenta and Ryuga. And Kenta also never met Ryuto on screen, so this works as well. But anyways, is this all a huge stretch? 100%. But it does make some sense, and it's a pretty fun theory. So let me know if you think Ryuto heard about the Star Fragment through a rumor, or did he physically meet a legendary blader and found out that way? Or do you have some sort of third alternate theory to mine? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what you want to see next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.